Ladies and gentlemen, we are joined by some very special guests tonight.
Richmond and I are all excited to be back here once again in beautiful British Columbia, surrounded by friends, surrounded by our great Conservative team, and I know they've all been introduced, but I'm going to ask them to just stand up one more time. Please join me in giving them a big hand that says we're behind them, and we're going to make sure we turn Richmond and the whole Lower Mainland bright Conservative blue.
C'est un choix, ça. Quel parti, quelle équipe a le leadership, l'expérience qui a fait ses preuves pour assurer la sécurité des Canadiens, des Canadiennes et la force de notre économie.
It's a choice about which party, which leader has the proven experience to keep Canadians safe and keep our economy strong. It isn't Justin Trudeau, he's just not ready. And it's not Mr. Mulcair and the NDP, whose high tax, high spending, high debt ideology would wreck our economy just as it has wrecked the economy of so many countries, and indeed so many of our own provinces, wherever it has been tried. Now, ladies and gentlemen, friends, since coming to office, our government has had to make choices, and sometimes difficult choices. Difficult choices in an unprecedented period of global economic instability. We don't control, people know, we don't control the price of oil. We don't control the price of the Chinese stock market or the financial mismanagement in other countries. But we have been focused on what we can do, and by the way, on what we should not do. The very things that Justin Trudeau and Thomas Mulcair wanted us to do. You know what they wanted us to do during this last several years of global economic instability? They wanted us to undertake huge, out-of-control increases to our spending. They wanted us to run permanent deficits. They wanted us to raise taxes. They wanted us to use Canadian tax dollars to bail out the debt problems of other countries. No, friends, we stuck to our plan, to our promises, to our economic action plan, and that's it. Because we have stuck to it, and because we have ignored what the Mulcair NDP and the Trudeau's Liberals said, that's why we have today, by far, the lowest debt burden in the G7 and years ahead of most developed countries. We have a balanced budget at the national level. The Canadian economy has been growing steadily for 6 years. It will grow again this year. Why? Since the depths of the global recession, Canada's economy has created nearly 1.3 million net new jobs, more people working today than ever by any measure. The best job creation record. That's why, to encourage growth and employment, we've lowered taxes for individuals, for families, and for job-creating businesses. C'est pour ça que nous avons maintenant le fardeau fiscal fédéral le plus bas en plus de 50 ans. That is why, friends, we have. A lot of people don't understand this. That's why we have at the federal level the lowest federal tax burden since John Diefenbaker was Prime Minister, the lowest federal tax burden in over 50 years. That's why we've concluded trade agreements with Europe, with the Americas, and with Asia. When we came to office, Canada had trade agreements with only 5 other countries in the rest of the world, in spite of being one of the most open economies, only 5. Today, we have trade deals with 44 countries and 44 countries. And friends, if you look at the free trade access that this country is going to have in the future across the world, never forget, 99% of it was created by Conservative governments. Friends, we should all be very proud that our government has done these things. More importantly, that our government has done what we said we would do. We have put the interests of average, everyday, hardworking Canadian families first. We've also helped all Canadians prepare for retirement, save for other things they can save for by creating the tremendously popular tax-free savings account. And in our economic action plan this spring, once again, we doubled the amount you can contribute, once again, just as we promised. When we put these things together, friends, over our term of office, the average Canadian family has, due to our policies, more than $6,500 additional right in their pockets. So when it comes to economic management, job creation, balanced budgets, lower taxes, real benefits for families, money in your pockets, nous avons fait ce que nous avions dit. Nous avons tenu nos promesses. We did what we said we would do. We delivered on our promises. That's leadership, and that's what conservative leadership is. What would our opponents do for our economy, for your taxes? Justin Trudeau cannot explain how he will pay for all his tens of billions of dollars in spending promises, but he says he doesn't have to. As he famously announced, and I quote, "The budget will balance itself." You know, I can't make up stuff about my life. Am I missing something? Budgets balance themselves here in Richmond. I bet you all wished your household budget would just balance itself. What about the NDP? Thomas Mulcair says he'll be able to spend more than us on everything. And he can do that because he will raise taxes, by raising taxes first on job-creating businesses, because he says those taxes are too low. But friends, when the CBC, it was not a tough interview, asked him what the business tax rate is, he didn't have a clue. And so that's about the best summary of NDP policy I've ever heard. We in the NDP don't know what your taxes are, but we know we're going to have to raise them. I want to talk a little bit more about this very seriously. Twice in the last 4 years, the NDP has held government in BC, so BC knows a thing or two about the NDP. And on each occasion, the NDP's economic management was a disaster for this province and for British Columbia. The 1990s in particular were a decade of darkness under the NDP. In response, British Columbians were voting with their feet. 50,000 people left to seek jobs and opportunity elsewhere. Provincial spending spiraled out of control. It rose by over 2/3, 68%, adding billions to the provincial debt. Tax rates on families and businesses climbed to the highest levels in the nation, and the average incomes of middle-class families in BC dropped. British Columbia, industrious, innovative, talented, resource-rich British Columbia, became a have-not province in Confederation in a few years. Friends, that is the NDP's record in BC, and we're going to make sure it never happens to this country. What a different place this province is today, despite the weakness in our energy sector. BC's economy is growing, it is booming. The province has returned to being an economic engine of Confederation. Under our national government, give some credit to the provincial government, British Columbians are looking to the future. Proud, confident, ready to seize the economic opportunity of the Asia-Pacific region like never before. But do not kid yourself. BC's prosperity, Canada's prosperity, these things are what is at risk in this election. But you, British Columbians, you will be a big part of the decision on October 19th. In fact, The voice of British Columbians will matter more in the outcome of this election than it ever has before. Gone are the days when Canadian elections are decided in the East before Westerners even vote. And why? Why? Because thanks to our Conservative government's commitment to fair and equitable representation for all provinces in the House of Commons, thanks to the changes our Conservative government made, British Columbia finally has its fair share of seats. British Columbia now has the largest proportion of seats it has ever had. 6 new seats for BC. That's what your BC MPs got. And friends, never forget this. They had to fight, we had to fight, Thomas Mulcair and Justin Trudeau every step of the way. Because Mulcair's NDP and Trudeau's Liberals voted against giving BC those seats because they do not believe in a fair share and fairness for Western Canada. Thanks to this government and your Conservative MPs, British Columbia may well now choose who will form the national government in Canada. And in making that choice here in BC, creating jobs and growing our economy, those are the biggest issues. And when we talk about the economy, friends, we must also talk about responsible resource development, responsible development of our natural resources. Our government knows well that the development of our resources and the proper care for our environment go hand in hand. But just in recent days, friends, we have been reminded once again of the NDP's not-so-hidden agenda when it comes to natural resource development. In an unscripted moment, their star candidate in the Toronto area suggested that our resources perhaps should just be left in the ground. And friends, this is the position that the Mulcair NDP and the federal Trudeau Liberals take regularly, coming out against projects again and again before the results of scientific environmental assessments are even completed. When push comes to shove, friends, these two parties always play to the anti-development crowd. And they have even taken this view when it comes to the development of British Columbia's LNG resources, projects that have the potential to create thousands of jobs in this province and bring billions of new investment. Friends, our government was proud to have introduced tax measures to promote jobs and growth in BC's LNG industry, just as both Mulcair's NDP and Justin's Liberals were proud to oppose it. Friends, that is why British Columbia needs more. Look at the world today. We have come too far to take reckless risks with our economy, with our stability, with our jobs. Vous pouvez regarder ailleurs dans le monde, dans certains pays, dans certaines provinces, pour voir où les politiques de Trudeau et de Mulcair nous mèneraient. De taxes et d'impôts élevés, de déficits sans fin, de ralentissement économique à long terme. You can look around the world at some countries, even at some provinces, to see where Trudeau's and Mulcair's policies would take us. In Canada, under careful Conservative management, we have a large and growing middle class, the wealthiest in the world, according to the New York Times. We have lower taxes, with more federal spending. With more federal spending on healthcare, education, infrastructure, the things that matter to hardworking families, and all with more jobs, a balanced budget, and good economic prospects for the future. So let's make sure on October 19th, we get once again a strong, stable national majority.